Welcome to another edition of Everyone Hates Cleveland, the podcast. A brand new guest from Cleveland, Ohio, Michael Pipe Boy Hattery. That's going to get taken the wrong way. Immediately, right out of the gate, we haven't potted in like 6 months.
Pipe Boy.
And immediately you're now Pipe Boy.
I get it. I get that a lot. Yeah, I'm glad to be on filling in for Gage Will on the Jim Pete Gage Will podcast.
Oh man, Gage, he's fighting for your spot.
Coming for you, Gage. You watch yourself.
If you're watching us on YouTube, which I hope you're doing, because Jeff Nomina has abandoned YouTube, just abandoned it. He's like, I'm running the show at YouTube, disappears and says he's busy. So if you're watching this on YouTube, please make sure you pay attention to the pipe. The only thing missing is corn cob. And again, that's going to get taken the wrong way. I don't know where this is going.
You want to air grievances, Jim? God. It's almost Festivus season. Let's have a Festivus episode.
God, this is what's going to happen? You're going to start here. This is where we're okay. Twist my arm.
Do feats of strength first, if that's what you prefer.
God, let's not do that. No feats of strength. I mean, I can lift my bottle of Southern Tier Porter. I tried to find Great Lakes Nosferatu, Mike Hattery. Guess what? Couldn't find any. So I had to go to New York.
No, I'll tell you what. It's been a while. One of the staples of this podcast is me being pissed at Great Lakes Brewery. Let's just talk for a second. They have probably 3 or 4 really good beers, right? They have Nosferatu, which that's not even a style of beer I generally like, but it's a killer beer. It's a great beer. They have Conway's, which is the prime spring beer. Just enough weight to it. Wonderful flavor. Delightful drinkability.
You know what the rumor is, though, Mike? It's not available in the spring. That's the rumor.
It's only available in January, February, and March in Cleveland, which doesn't make any sense at all. Then they have made Turntable like a year round. And that is a garbage beer. It is borderline undrinkable. The only one in those samplers that's drinkable is the Elliot Ness, because the Dortmunder is way better on tap. It's not very good bottled. And what's the porter in there? I mean, come on. That's ridiculous.
I will agree with you on the Elliot Ness. It sneaks up on me every time.
It's
every single time.
It's my wife's favorite. She's a huge Elliot Ness fan.
Yeah. I didn't know we were going to air our grievances to Great Lakes, but yeah, I forgot. Like last year, Mike, if you remember, I had a nice little pile of Nosferatu. I had a nice little pile of Conways. I'm empty now. I've moved on.
You know what? So here's what's great about them. You know what also is drinkable? Grandes Lagos is a fine early summer beer, and it should be an all summer beer. Very refreshing. But going back, my dad in upstate New York calls me from Wegmans about 2 weeks ago. Big Wegmans shout out. And he's like, "Hey,
Wegmans,
like Conway's? Is Conway's a good beer? Like, is it a good Great Lakes beer?" And I was like, "Yeah, Dad, it is." He's like, "Oh, well, they have a 12-pack here. I'm gonna go get some for myself." And I was like, that's great. Some guy in New York, in Rochester, can get this. But I live 15 minutes from the damn brewery, and I cannot get Conway's.
See, here's the thing. Wegmans is great. Wegmans probably made their own Conway's. That's how great Wegmans is.
It's true. It's a true story. True story.
All right, maybe we should air our grievances about the Cleveland Indians, because I think while I've been bitching and moaning on this podcast randomly to different people over the past 6 months, we have not been able to do it together. And I think I know where we have to start with this. And I was going to start with like actual discussions going on, but we haven't had an opportunity, Mike, to get on this podcast and talk about Carlos Santana at all. So we might as well just start there. And I at least then maybe we can get through it all and maybe eventually talk about something that might happen over this offseason. But we haven't had a chance to talk since the free agency stuff, of course, qualifying offer, doesn't accept it. We all knew that was going to happen. Now he's a free agent. How gone is Carlos Santana? Do we have a better chance of signing the guitar guy?
What's you've watched The Princess Bride, right? And they go into that doctor's, that sort of medicinal man's house,
Billy
working
Crystal,
on him, and they're saying,
wish, my friend.
is he
Yes,
dead,
I've seen
right?
it.
He's only mostly dead. And I would say that Santana is only mostly gone. He's only mostly gone. So what's weird is we hear conflicting stuff about like financial flexibility. So this creates a couple problems. If they're financially flexible, that's fine. I think if they're flexible, I think they end up making another sort of like slightly cheaper Encarnacion-esque move, which is, this is a thin market. Multiple big deals have been done. Maybe Hosmer goes to Boston, and all of a sudden New York and Boston aren't really spending any money this offseason. LA's pretty high against the luxury tax here. So all of a sudden you have one or two guys who probably are going to go for below what they should on the market. So maybe they jump in. If that's not the case, if the Indians don't have flexibility, which, I think is very possible, then we spent $12 million on a guy who can't walk right now.
Oh no!
So that's fun. And
no.
we don't really have a position for Kipnis if we keep Brantley in left, and if we play Brantley at first, his bat doesn't really play there. And if we move J-Ram to second, J-Ram back to third, and put Kipnis at second, then we have no place for Yandy Diaz to play, who's like one of the more interesting cheap bats the Indians have.
Could they, just in this scenario, maybe we'll come back to this, I just want to throw this out there, but could it be just this? They're putting Brantley at first. Kipnis is just playing second. J-Ram at third. And is it possible that the plan right now is just to have Diaz in some form or fashion playing left? Wouldn't that be the easiest thing? My thought other than the fact that they played him at freaking third base for all of September for no reason.
And he was like really good defensively. The Indians.
That's not narrative, Mike. Tito Francona's narrative for Yandy is he's learning the position.
I will never understand when you're going to face CC Sabathia for 2 starts. The Indians knew this before they set their roster. If they go deep in the playoffs. And the most dangerous pitcher to match up against is Aroldis Chapman on this team. And the Indians said, hey, let's not bring one of our 5 best right-handed bats with us. That's what they said about Yandy Diaz. They said, hey, let's bring this guy who carries a toothpick up to the plate and get him 15 playoff ABs. There's just certain stuff that there's sometimes where I feel like I'm losing my fandom. Like you write enough and like you talk yourself into playoff variance and you're like, you know what? It's fine. I understand the outcome. It's all good. But then there's the shit where you're like, you know what? No, because I've had to watch Michael Martinez and Giovanni Urshela take game and franchise impactful plate appearances 2 consecutive seasons, and I'm sick of that shit. I'm not doing it anymore. And yeah, it's embarrassing when they signed Michael Martinez to an offseason NRI. And don't act like it isn't, because goddamn it, he's going to play. The Indians already have better utility infielders in-house. I'm not a huge Eric Gonzalez fan. I mean, you and I have never been really high on him. We thought he was a util type guy. He's still way better. This is just, I'm so sick of it. And like everybody talks about the move, like why aren't the Indians making like the kill move to match Stanton or whatever? I don't really give a shit about the kill move. I just don't want to watch Giovanni Urshela take 15 PAs in the playoffs and 5 against Aroldis Chapman. That's all I want. And that doesn't mean Urshela can't be on a playoff roster. He's a great defender and weird stuff happened in the playoffs. But it does mean you better build your roster to match up in that sense. The Indians could go get Christian Yelich. That'd be awesome. But maybe just go, build your roster correctly.
Well, I mean, it's, and a lot of people say, well, they didn't know about Edwin Encarnacion. But, I mean, to me, you can't be one injury away from having the lineup they had. I mean, this is a team that won 102 games in the regular season. And while that really doesn't mean anything, that 22-game streak, as great as it was, doesn't really mean a lot. You really shouldn't be a 102-game winner with one move. And granted, Encarnacion's our highest-paid player, and I'm not trying to undersell that. But you shouldn't be one move away from becoming a toothpick swinging team. Even if you're, I mean, and granted, they did have some, Ramirez was slumping. It was like the worst case scenario, but it just seems like that one move. Okay, let's back this up. Brantley, what the hell was Brantley doing on the freaking roster? To explain the sense I get it. Never, ever, ever question Tito Santana or Tito Francona, but how in the hell do you have a guy who missed 6 weeks? What am I saying? He didn't play since July. In any effective manner. So that's the start of this. And I guess, going back to the great piece written by Gerbs talking about Tito boys, Mike, this goes way back to when we were talking about this 2 years ago, a year ago. Does there come a point when you're able to look at the roster and the talent that you have and say, we would have won a whole lot of games with anybody as manager? When can you legitimately question a guy like Tito Francona? Because it seems to me, that this window, and it's still open, we still have a long period of time because we have this pitching signed through 2021. But to me, when you start seeing kind of the end of some of these players' careers in Cleveland, starting with Santana, Michael Brantley, you can almost throw in there right now, even though, he'll come back healthy. Oh, all the injuries, come from this surgery, not have a spring training, but he'll be great. But we also are seeing Kipnis coming towards the end of his deal, or at least towards the end of his run here, either by trade or by the time his contract runs out. I'm not saying that the end is near, but we are coming to the tail end of the first part of this window. When do we start saying, wait, shouldn't we have won a World Series by now?
Yeah, I just haven't.
Wait. If you're listening to this and you're surprised, this is Mike Hattery and Jim Pete. This is what we do. Deal with it. We haven't had a chance. The Indians haven't done shit, and we got December 14th coming. We know nothing's going to happen. So, well, maybe it is. We haven't gotten there yet. I'm just getting pissed off all of a sudden. You're bringing out all this bad stuff, man. I'm blaming you.
Yeah, I just, what's amazing to me is this year was the best Indians team of my. I wasn't really that cognitively functioning during the 90s, so somebody else can have that argument. This is just the best Indians team I've had a chance to consume with regularity, and it's sucky to watch back-to-back Octobers. And they were really lucky. I think you have to look at 2016 with joy, and you're really happy that happened. The Indians were not with all the injuries, the Indians were probably the second worst team that got into the playoffs in terms of the roster that played in the playoffs, and they get within a couple outs of a World Series. And maybe that's just baseball. Maybe now we have to watch the Indians' most talented team get spoiled, despite the fact that they completely remove Aaron Judge from the entire series, and Didi Gregorius just kicks their ass. That's just baseball. And Didi Gregorius is good, but that's just baseball. And maybe I have to come to terms with that. But it's just really tough when you watch a team that's done, there are so many decisions that had to go right to get you to these couple swings at a World Series. You had to get Kluber and fix Kluber. You had to get Ramirez right. You had to get Lindor right. You had to get so many things right. And then you make really inefficient decisions, and they have marginal probability influences, but they're not hard to make. They're simple. They're simple decisions. And so that's what's really frustrating. Maybe if Diaz is on the team, it doesn't matter. Maybe if Brantley isn't on the roster, it doesn't matter. But it was obvious. Make the right decision so we don't have any remorse. I think is where I'm at. And we can move on to this offseason and where they're going. I think we've probably, I don't know.
Well, okay. So let's come full circle here as we go into the offseason. I think probably, and we haven't really talked about this in a while, other than maybe touching upon it in Slack and touching upon it on Twitter. Looking at the way things are right now, and obviously the Indians are in a waiting pattern with a bunch of other teams as we wait for kind of the quote unquote big free agents to sign. But I do have to ask you, Mike, and obviously we're Carlos Santana homers. We've been since our IBI days through EHC now here. But I do have to ask you, once he turned down that qualifying offer, there was a lot of scuttlebutt about 10 or 11 teams being interested, making offers, so on and so forth. It seems to me that there has been a big disconnect between 2016, 2017, the end of both seasons. In discussions, once they signed Edwin Encarnacion, you and I actually had this conversation talking about, was that their big move for this offseason, looking forward to Carlos Santana not signing. But I have to ask you, last year when talking about the kind of money that Carlos Santana was going to make, I think the general consensus was that he wasn't going to come near the $60 million, the 3-year $60 million deal, $60 million a year deal that Encarnacion signed with the Indians, with the option for another 20 at the tail end of that. Now this year, entering the offseason, you've got some scuttlebutt here that Santana is going to be touching 80 to 100 million, 5 years. And granted, that was early in the offseason, but it seems like there's been a disconnect between January of last year and November of this year. Is this just an early kind of volley that people are in our circle are making, or is Santana just getting lucky in an offseason prior to a really big offseason, although this one's turned out to have some pretty big deals moving? Or are we just jumping the gun on Santana? Is he probably going to end up getting something more like what Encarnacion ended up getting with the Indians at the tail end of December, early January? I mean, I'm struggling with this because to me it seems like, even though we value Santana highly, to me it seems like he should be getting a smidge under that. But is he just catching the right wave?
Yeah, to me, I think he should get basically right around Encarnacion. He's coming onto the market, 2 years younger than Encarnacion. One of the arguments you can make is that I think it's easier to buy into Santana's, plate discipline and limited strikeout sort of profile aging a little better. Yeah, I mean, to me, I would say I think 351 with an option year is kind of like what we're going to see. So just like a smidge cheaper than Encarnacion. And maybe it's a team option, maybe it's a player option. So I would assume a team option for 20. So 351 with a $20 million option, or maybe 18. So it gets you to 469. I think 351 makes a ton of sense.
Okay, so let's look at the Indians situation then, because you're looking at a team, if everything plays the same and everything plays the way it's supposed to with arbitration and with what we end up offering players, the Indians should come in somewhere around 130 million with almost a full roster. Last year they ended at, I think, 149, 150 million, somewhere in that ballpark. Does this mean, and this is where I think in all of our scuttlebutt kind of behind the scenes, we're trying to figure out what they have available. Does this mean that the Indians do have the money to sign Santana and maybe don't, or will choose not to use it? Or do they have the money and they're just waiting to see what's available? I'm kind of struggling here with the salary because, of course, we're used to the Indians not being in the 100 millions of payroll. And we know payroll is going up across the league, but besides the point, it does seem to me that the Indians have the money to sign Santana to a deal should they want to. Are they playing the waiting game perhaps to get him in a deal, or are they just looking at more cost-effective options?
I almost wonder I think there are a couple issues for the Indians. I think they may not want to have 100 million wrapped up in first base DH for the next 3 years. And I think that's really possible. I think they see a couple of players who probably should move off their positions. I think Brantley, you don't pick up that option if you really. I just don't pick up 12 million on a guy who can't play and
just stop there. You don't pick up that option. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. But I mean, I think that long term, you think to get value out of your Kipnis or Brantley plays, you want them to play first base or DH a little bit. I think Kipnis could be awesome in left field, but that means you still have to move Brantley to first base. And I think the Indians may just not want to wrap that up. The other thing too is I think Santana deserves it, but I think he's going to get basically paid what his actual value is. And I think one of the things we don't talk about a lot with the Indians is they don't really like to, nor can they afford to pay fair market value for players. They need surplus. And so if they're going to hang around and go spend 50 million on a player, I think they'd like to spend it on someone who they think can provide them a lot more surplus than Santana can. I love Santana. He's a really good floor guy. And so I think he's a really safe bet to match what you pay him, but I don't think he's a very good bet to exceed what they're going to pay him on the market. In which case, if you're sitting around with 50 million or 60 million, whatever you're thinking about long term, and say Lorenzo Cain comes across unbelievably, way below what he should get paid. He has way more upside, or Moustakas, who has a little upside to exceed his value. Or there's a couple other players that I'm not thinking off the top of my head, but I think the Indians, the Encarnacion deal made a lot of sense for them because they saw that they could pay him and expect some surplus value. And I'm not sure they can see that happening with Santana.
Well, I mean, you could be looking at a scenario where to me, if you're talking about looking for a guy who could bring you in a little bit of surplus value, I think a guy like Jay Bruce, who I think maybe a lot of people lost their minds over, and don't get me wrong, Jay Bruce is a good baseball player. To me, it seems like if you're going to get a guy that slides down salary-wise, Jay Bruce might be that guy. And I'm not saying we should sign Jay Bruce. I'm not even saying I'm right here, but wouldn't he be the kind of player that's more likely than Santana to perhaps slide down to something that's maybe a little more substantial for the Indians to do, maybe something around, a 2 or 3 year, $10 million a year deal?
Yeah, I think Bruce is like kind of the perfect example in that I really think he's probably going to get like 3 or 4 less annual average value, maybe more, probably capped at a 3-year commitment. He's someone who could get like 3 and 40. And he's someone who's a really good sale to me in that I think he's a really good type of risk for a team like the Indians, as well as a couple of these other, like you have, is it Logan Morrison, Yonder Alonso, and there's a third first baseman. But to me, Bruce is really interesting. He can still play the outfield, but there's these group of guys who basically in the last 2 years last year made this adjustment to like where baseball is going. They altered their launch angles significantly, and that's not the end all be all, but for someone like Bruce, it kind of is because he's a power driven player. And so if you buy that change lasting long term, you can expect a certain level of production that his overall statistics don't reflect. And so I think he's someone who has some upside for providing extra value because teams aren't going to pay him like he's going to match this year, but there's still a chance because he's completely overhauled, how he approaches hitting. And so I think that sort of player is a really interesting gamble for the Indians.
All right. So, we can banter about free agents. I do want to ask you one question. It really hasn't been talked about a whole lot. Is it possible as well that the Indians could be looking for a starting pitcher as their free agent get? Again, I think we look at their starting pitching as a positive overall, but I do think year after year, we've sort of been waiting for them to maybe sign a guy who's a 4 or 5 guy. And granted, we could run down the guys who can fill in the roster. Of course, Tomlin signed, they pick up Tomlin's option. But could it be a starting pitcher, or could they be trying to load up on relief arms, kind of looking forward past a year where we very possibly are losing 2 of the top 10 relief pitchers in baseball after the 2018 season? Could the Indians maybe be waiting for something like that? Or are we going – we're going to talk about a trade possibility here, maybe a couple. Is it that they're just maybe planning on maybe doing a cost balance here by trading away some salary like Jason Kipnis or even a Yan Gomes, as you mentioned in a piece earlier this year? Actually, both pieces at WFNY you wrote. Is it possible that they're waiting for maybe a starting pitcher or relief pitcher, or might they be looking to cost balance by making a deal with some of maybe a quote unquote surplus asset in Yan Gomes? And I guess based on where they can place him and considering some of the players coming up, might Jason Kipnis be looked at as a surplus player now, which I'm not trying to downgrade Kipnis, a 5-WAR player, other than when he's injured. But, him at second base, obviously a surplus player with a guy like Jose Ramirez. And in left field, you do have a lot of more cost-effective options. And I hate saying the word cost-effective with a team who should be battling for a World Series. But we do have some pretty good guys that can fill in. Might they be looking to cost balance with the trade, or potentially are they looking at starting pitchers as opposed to what we figured, outfielders, first baseman, just based on what they have at AAA and maybe hovering around that quad A area?
Yeah, I hope they're looking that way. Makes a lot of sense. The starting pitching market is sort of insane. Like, it's really interesting. Tyler Chatwood, we were talking about, as this like sort of like flyer arm who's been really inconsistent, who's like a good gamble, and you could convert him to the bullpen, and he's just got 3-38, which is sort of just like, I'm not sure the Indians can play in those waters with starting pitchers. That's just crazy to me.
Well, what kind of value does that give Danny Salazar in the trade market, though?
I know.
3-38. And I know that we're not the only ones that look. Granted, most of the Cleveland public now want him in the bullpen, but what am I saying? Now want him in the bullpen? Have been saying bullpen for 4 years, but on the market, as a starter, wouldn't he have some weight?
Yeah, that's the thing. I think Salazar has inhabited that space that Santana once inhabited. I think Santana sort of set himself free, but I think Salazar has sort of long lost the expectations game, wherein he's actually a really rock solid mid-rotation starter who's going to give you 120 to 145 really good innings every year. And I think watching him, it's frustrating as hell because, he's ridiculously talented, and that can be really frustrating for fans. So we sort of miss, like, he's still a really good mid-rotation starter, and people mock him, and then you watch the Yankees run CC Sabathia out in a playoff game, and Salazar is in the bullpen.
Really a great comparison, though, Mike, because I think Santana coming up in 2010, a lot of people were looking at 30 and 300 from him every single year, and of course, maybe the worst thing that ever happened to Danny Salazar was hitting 100 in his first game. I think that the expectations for him, including from guys that know him really well, like me, were that he was going to be that top of the line ace. And that just hasn't been in the cards. And now we're not talking about a 22 or 23-year-old anymore. We're talking about a guy, 27, 28, who's kind of past that, heading into prime years, and just who hasn't had that full complete season yet. So that is a fantastic. I've never really thought about him being compared to Carlos Santana, but that is absolutely dead on. The Indians still clearly look at him. Do the Indians even still look at him as a starter? It seems like what they're doing with their bullpen lends to believe that maybe Salazar's going there.
Yeah, but I also want to delineate that, like, I don't think he's going. I think the Indians are riding this. The Indians are always on the cutting edge, and I don't think he's going into the bullpen in our traditional understanding of the bullpen. And you and I have talked about this a lot. The reason I've sort of said, I'd be cool with him moving to the bullpen, is if you turn him into like a Chris Stefanski, however the hell you pronounce it, his last name type, where he throws close to 100 innings. He's a multi-inning at a time guy, and he's pitching in high leverage. And maybe you're basically piggybacking him and Tomlin, and maybe you're, starting Salazar, but he's going like 3 or 4 innings, airing it out, and then Tomlin's going 2 or 3 innings. Because that, I think that's really possible in order to protect your arm. So in that sense, I'm okay with him moving to the bullpen, but I don't think that's not what people are talking about. They want him to throw 50 innings of high leverage baseball and like take over Brian Shaw's job, and that's a waste of an arm to me. I don't really care.
Good Lord, Danny Salazar taking over Brian Shaw's job. Oh my God! I just thinking that makes me want to crack this bottle over my head. But this is where when 2 years ago when we were talking about Jose Ramirez potentially playing a flex position, and then we've sort of watched the Indians be on the cusp of potentially having 2 or 3 guys, Yandy Diaz being one of them, certainly Jose Ramirez is one of them, of these multifaceted guys who can play multi places in the infield, outfield. Wouldn't it, if you're going to be manipulating the bullpen the way you just said, and it's, to me, when you're looking for market inefficiency, that's what you're doing. Like, why the hell aren't the Indians going all in with guys like Yandy Diaz, as these multifaceted players that literally could take up roles. It could give you that extra spot in the bullpen. And when I say extra spot in the bullpen, I mean an actual legit spot where we can utilize starters and relief pitchers in the way you just said throughout the regular season. Are the Indians ever going to commit to that? Or, I mean, and this is kind of where I think my biggest hangup is with Terry Francona. It seems like if his back's against the wall, he'll do some of this stuff. I don't know that he'll do it as a thing, though. You know, you see guys like Joe Madden doing it during the regular season. And again, I'm not saying one's better. Let me just back away from that comment for a second. I just don't see Francona doing the kinds of things that you need to do. And then you bring in Carl Willis and you get rid of Beret. And it seems to me, and again, I don't really know the makeup of this coaching staff, and I'm not trying to knock Carl Willis either, but it doesn't seem like we almost have the personnel on the field to make these kinds of moves that you're discussing.
Yeah.
We haven't even talked coaching staff yet. Yay.
Yeah, we talked about, like, you can just, like, see, like, pregame, like, sitting in the dugout. You have, like, Francona, Millsy, and Willis sitting next to each other.
Wait. I love Sandy Alomar, but he's become, to me, like this droopy dog guy. Like, nobody even talked about him this offseason. Like, I thought he left. He's still on the team. Like, what's he gonna be? Sandy.
It's the oldest dugout in baseball. I swear to God. It is, and it's kind of scary. I think there's some really weird.
Me, Mike. They're all older than me. That's old.
I know. There's some weird stuff going on with this coaching staff too. The Beret thing is like pretty ugly, which is something we're not.
Remember when we had the conversation that maybe they were giving Callaway a whole bunch of money to eventually take over managing the team, and that's why nobody's been knocking on the door for him? It almost felt like that was the thing, and then this year they were like, not so much.
And then Mickey's gone, and I think the Beret firing, the guy basically didn't expect the pitching coach job. He just wanted an interview. He doesn't get it. They fire him. And it's not like he's not well liked in the bullpen. I mean, he was well received there. You have a hitting coach who leaves this team to go work as an assistant hitting coach for the Rays. You think he went there because that's a better opportunity? This is a way better team to work with. You think I mean, there's stuff going on in terms of how this coaching staff that's made up that there's like a little bit of there's a little power struggle. And it's unfortunate. And we can act like it doesn't exist. And it's amazing that it's not talked about to have that much turnover of a coaching staff that just won 102 games and not like they're all getting jobs. I mean, Callaway got a job, but like there's just turnover.
Well, yeah, when Callaway gets the job, should be a domino effect in an organization like the Indians for people to move up, for people like Beret to slide right into the job, to bring up a guy like Dave Wallace, or perhaps to bring up a guy like Steve Carsey, or some of these other guys who have some advanced thinking going on in lower levels. But instead of that happening, we bring in a guy from Boston who got kind of bumped out by Brian Bannister, who is an analytical thinker and a younger thinker. Now, this to me, Mike, seems very much against what the Indians have been doing in the front office for years, and that's one guy leaves, another guy fills his place. It seems like we got the old boys club here in Cleveland. Just me. I need to get another beer. I'm going to let you start talking on that subject. I will be back in 4.7 seconds.
I don't really. Okay. I got it. I guess it's infuriating.
Well, really you got to say this, though, Mike. I mean, if there's anybody of the two of us who's going to be all for the old boys club, it's me. And you've kind of been steering my ship for the past 3 years. And I'm kind of at this place now where, you have to have a balance. I get the Terry Francona thing. He's a great manager, obviously. We don't know what would happen to this club without him. My assumption is with the talent that we have that you or I could probably steer the ship, at least in some direction. I'm not saying I'm a better manager than Terry Francona, nor I'm saying you are. I'm just saying there's a lot of talent there. And it's not, I'm not knocking – when I knock Terry Francona, I'm saying that we have freaking talent that this front office has been acquiring for years in one way or another. It seems to me that we're giving Terry Francona a little bit too much credit because, I don't know, Carlos Santana can play baseball. I don't know, Kipnis can play baseball. Lindor can play baseball. Jose Ramirez can play baseball. These are guys that were not created by Terry Francona. For crying out loud, Mickey Callaway and Ruben Niebla and a bunch of other guys helped Corey Kluber along his way. Carlos Carrasco was not built by moves by Terry Francona. I'm just saying that, yes, steering the ship is important, but there's all of these other things that have happened with all of these other important coaches, and now they seem to be going away, and that seems kind of important.
Yeah, I think Manny Acta could have gotten the Indians to 95 wins last year. So
that is now the title of this podcast.
I mean,
Actually, it might be.
One of the things with Francona is he played one of the most important roles in Indians baseball in the last 20 years, which is when they were at the bottom of the barrel, he brought a face to an organization that brought some respect to it after some really bad times. So I think his role in this renaissance is really important. I'm not sure people understand how effing good this roster is and was in 2017. I mean, it was a top 5 lineup in baseball. It was a top 3 bullpen, and it was the best rotation in baseball. I mean, that is just loaded talent. And so he deserves so much credit for where we were 4 or 5 years ago and bringing credibility to the organization.
Can I counter that for 1 second? So is that credibility across the league, or is that credibility in the paper? Because, I mean, this front office since 1987 with Hank Peters has been pretty credible across the league. I mean, are we overblowing that? I mean, I don't get me wrong. I mean, I know that Terry Francona carries weight with players and always will. That's who he is. That's a commendable. That's an amazing attribute in a league where managers get tossed to the side. He got tossed to the side when he was in Philly. I mean, this is that kind of league. But I mean, at the end of the day, this front office has been as good as it gets for the past 30 years. I mean, are we giving him maybe too much credit? And I realize I'm going to get slammed when people listen to this, but I don't really care.
Yeah, I think there's a possibility, and I just think we have no idea what value managers have. Like, we literally have none. No, and we have no idea. And I do think there's something to what you said in that I think there was a lot more credibility brought in Cleveland by Francona's hiring. Because basically now most of the people who cover the team never ask a serious question. Because, they can't. Francona doesn't take flack except for bloggers and power nerds like ourselves. And we get shat on for it, and that's fine.
It's okay. Opinions.
I don't care.
It's okay.
I think he's a good manager, but I think we have no idea what a good manager is. When he had a really bad roster in Philly, they were terrible. Was he a terrible manager? Probably not. I think he was fine. When he was in Boston with a historically good roster, they won a couple World Series. When he was in Cleveland with a really good roster, he's won a lot of games. I don't really know. Is he worth 2 wins a year? Maybe. Is he worth 2 losses a year? Maybe. I don't fucking know.
I don't think we're ever gonna. The great thing about Terry Francona and off the field stuff, I mean, obviously there's value there. We don't know what that is, and I think that's the most mind-numbing part of all this. The greatest thing for me about Terry Francona is you and I could literally do a podcast a week just on Terry Francona, and it could be different every week. And I think if we did that, the nice thing about it was we could bring some credibility to other people perhaps asking those types of questions. Maybe that's what we should do. We should have our Terry moment of the week where we talk about for 10 minutes about, it's okay if you call Terry Francona out for some reason or another. I mean, I just, I don't know. I mean, I'm a pretty good teacher. I mean, have people been able to call me out on stuff over the years? Sure. We aren't perfect. It's so frustrating to me. They don't make it to the World Series this year. And you talked about the variance, but it's okay to call the manager of the team out, especially when he's the one calling the shots. That's the guy you should be calling out. But whatever. I don't know.
There's this thing. I don't get this thing anymore. Like, George Washington and Thomas Jefferson were slaveholders. I don't understand. There's this anti-critical nature in our society where like there's certain people where you don't talk about their like negative traits.
Nuance is gone. If you're not an extremist, Mike, you're not worth talking about.
And it's like, if you're watching 170 games a year of a guy making decisions, he's going to make some bad ones because you go to work 170 days a year and you make some bad ones. That's life. Even if you think you're really good at your job, you may be amazing at your job, but you're going to make mistakes. And so, what the hell else are we going to talk about? What do you want us to talk? You want us to talk about baseball? We'll talk about baseball. You don't want to talk about baseball? We won't talk about baseball. But I'm worn out, and I'm worn out where someone can write a really detailed research thing saying, hey, Terry Francona is a really good manager, but he has this one proclivity that we're a little worried about, which is he overuses some veterans in some uncomfortable situations. And then you have 15 people subtweeting this person because he didn't just, I can't say this stuff on air, but he didn't just bow down to Terry Francona. And I don't have time for that. Just shut the fuck up. I'm sick of it.
See, I missed this. This is what the EHC gauge, man.
I can't.
Plus, I missed it. I missed it, man. Thank you.
And I'm not calling out one person. It's just this thing where it's wearing me out, man. It's just.
Well, I think we're not going to call anyone out, but I don't know. We're not. It's been a while since we've potted together. Give it time. Give a couple more podcasts. I'm sure we'll have some names thrown out there. There's been so much fun this offseason with changes in personnel. I think that we've got plenty to talk about over the coming year, but we'll hold off on that. I do want to talk about one more thing before we wrap things up. And there's been some scuttlebutt that the Mets have called the Indians about Jason Kipnis, which makes sense, being that Mickey Callaway is there. I think we'll probably hear some New York Mets rumors, not only this offseason, but going all the way to July, depending on how good or bad the Mets are, or how good or bad the Indians are. This is kind of the way I take it, Mike, and I think maybe you're a little tied into this maybe than I am, but this is kind of the way I'm taking this. I don't think the Indians are actively searching to trade Jason Kipnis. I think that teams are looking at the Indians much like we are right now and seeing maybe Kipnis as a surplus piece. To me, Kipnis isn't going anywhere unless something blows them out of the water. Are they shopping Jason Kipnis, or are they doing what they typically do and just kind of sitting back and letting the phone ring?
I think it's a little more active than the sit back approach, because I think they don't really know how they're going to fit some pieces of this team together. I think the Brantley option and where Diaz is at this point makes it sort of weird to fit all those pieces together again in 2018. I think Kipnis becomes a lot more movable if they think they have a play for a Santana or a Santana type. I think he basically has at least $28 million guaranteed for the next 2 years. And that's basically a down payment on, or maybe 55% of a contract for someone like Santana, maybe 60%. So I think he's more in play that if they see a secondary move they can make with his contract, they can trade him for an interesting flyer from the Mets and find another piece that maybe makes this roster make more sense. I personally don't like that much. To me, he's someone, I think his odds of rebound are pretty good, and he has a lot of upside, and I think they're probably better off hanging on to his talent. I don't think there are a lot of guys who are just over 30 and have posted 4+ WAR 3 of the last 4 years or 3 of the last 5 years and are coming back healthy. I think for a team like the Indians, he's a good gamble health-wise. And I think he's one that you're not going to get enough value from another team where the gamble isn't just worth bringing him back.
Well, and you beat me sort of to the punch there. I mean, I'm not saying he's a sell low based on a season last year. I think most people know he'll rebound if he's healthy. But I agree with you 100%. I think there's a couple of the age piece being slight. I think what they'd want back. I just don't think they'd get that value back. But who knows? I mean, who knows as this offseason progresses? I would be all up for a Jason Kipnis deal if they can again kind of counterbalance it with a position of need. And I'm not really sure. I'm in the middle of trying to work something out on a piece about Kipnis and perhaps what they could get to balance that out without it looking like a salary dump, which is not something that I want to see. All right, I do want to ask one more question. And in this kind of looking forward, and this maybe talking a little bit about guys like Yandy Diaz and Bradley Zimmer and Greg Allen, kind of looking at those three specifically, even a Tristan McKenzie, some of these younger guys that are going to be factors in the next 2 to 3 years. Are the Indians not there yet I think Zimmer's obviously probably starting in center. But are they not there yet with guys like Yandy Diaz? I mean, you seem to be alluding to him being kind of right there. I mean, based on September. Greg Allen, of course, was also a factor, makes the roster, that kind of thing. Are they a legit factor in 2018 coming out of spring? And I guess specifically I'm talking about Diaz and Allen. And are you still concerned about Bradley Zimmer? I mean, we saw regression throughout the season last year, offensively especially. Obviously, defensively, he's the best thing we've seen in center field for several years, probably since Grady Sizemore. So I guess my question, twofold question, is Greg Allen and Yandy Diaz going to be a factor, one, coming out of spring? And what are your concerns right now about Bradley Zimmer coming off injury, coming off offensive struggle, knowing what we know about him in the minors, offensively especially?
All right. Diaz has got to be, he's 27. It's time. His bat was awesome in the second half. I think he would have been good the whole year. The Indians just pulled the plug on him a little too quickly. His sort of batted ball and BABIP outcomes suggested that the first half was sort of a fluke, and he was just good in the second half. He was good at third base. I think he fits there. I think his versatility, if you trust him, is really valuable. I think left field for the Indians is awesome because, or at home, you play 81 games in a really easy place to play left field. You have a shallower fence that's pretty easy to play, and you have a rangy as hell shortstop, which allows you to position your left fielder pretty well. So I think, I actually am semi in love with the idea of Jason Kipnis just taking over left field because I think he could be a plus defender there. I think his bat's got some life, and I think he wouldn't be beat up the way he is at second base. I think second base is really killing his body at this point. Maybe you want to nuke his body and protect Ramirez's and leave Ramirez at third. I understand that. You have a great contract with Ramirez, but I think if you're worried about getting production out of Kipnis, you move him off second. As for Zimmer, I'm worried. I don't know how worried I am. It depends what people expect from Zimmer, right? I think you and I sort of don't have huge expectations. I think he's going to be a really valuable big league player. I think he can steal 20 bases. I think he can hit 20 homers. I think he's going to hit 220. I don't know what your thoughts are, but he just doesn't make enough contact and he pulls the ball a lot. And I think if he plays really good defense and hits 20 bombs, he's a really good cheap player for the next 5 years. And I think that's good enough. I just don't think.
God, I think if you take the name away, and I know people are going to hammer me for this, but do you know who you made me think of when you said all that?
I don't know.
You're going to love this.
Colby Rasmus?
No, but it is a Hattery guy. He's former Indian.
Drew Stubbs,
baby. Drew Stubbs. I knew you'd get it.
I think,
are we looking at a very similar player to Drew Stubbs? He's got the same kind of speed. He strikes out a ton, can play the outfield. Maybe.
Yeah, I love that comp because I think, I think people need to put Indians Drew Stubbs. He was solid that 1 year, but Drew Stubbs for 3 years in Cincinnati was just a damn good ball player. And Jim has to watch Game of Thrones, so we better cut this short.
Okay. Oh, there's James. There's the golfer right there. If you're watching live.
Let's see that swing. Let's see it.
He got headphones on. He has no idea we're talking about him.
Are you live streaming?
Yeah.
Are you live streaming?
All right. Sorry, man. All right. So you hit Zimmer. We just compared him to Stubbs. We need to stop there to let the rumblings go on there. What about Greg Allen? Okay, let me give you one more little bit, and then I'll back out of the way. I really think that contact. You talked to Dave Wallace last year about the style of hitter that the Indians were looking for, and Jose Ramirez kind of being that contact guy. Where Greg Allen certainly fits into. Is it possible defensively that Greg Allen is at least, or I think he's better defensively than Bradley Zimmer is in the center field. I think his body maybe impactually, health-wise, is better suited to center field. I think contact-wise, I think if you give him time, he's going to be a guy who can hit 260, 270, get on base a whole bunch, cause some wicked damage on the bases. I'm not saying Zimmer's not great on the base path. He is. Is it possible that we see Greg Allen over the course of this next year or two take over center field and gradually push Zimmer to right?
Yeah, I think it's beyond possible. I think there's a really decent chance that happens, and a couple reasons. I think we talk about how fast Zimmer is, but we don't talk about his acceleration speed, which is not actually that elite. And his defensive numbers in center were semi-propped up by his arm being really awesome. Whereas I think like route for route, Greg Allen's just better. But you know that more than I. You've seen Allen play defense more than I have. I've only seen him a couple times in Akron, and it was just after injury, so I don't really. His bat's so interesting, though. He makes a ton of contact. He seems to handle the bat head well. He has good plate discipline. I mean, he walked fairly effectively. And one of the things that's always stuck with me, like I talked to Dave Wallace last offseason about, guys like Diaz, guys like Allen, Ramirez, Lindor, how these guys add contact. And, one of the things that was impressive was he was like, Greg Allen is the strongest player we had in Akron this year and one of the strongest in the entire Indians organization. He's jacked. He's a semi-gym rat. And while he's slim enough and super athletic enough to play center field, there's a lot of muscle. So I do think that a little elevation, a couple of tweaks, and that bat plays really interestingly in center field. So Allen's a guy who I think is a post sleeper now. He was a huge sleeper prospect. The injuries kind of slowed him down. I think if you see him healthy for 80 games or 60 games, just raking in Columbus, I think people's perspectives are really going to change. He's still young enough that that's doable, and he's just such a good athlete. He also is beloved. He's locker room beloved. He's a lot of fun. He's a little bit of a cliche machine, which drives me crazy, but you can tell he just loves it. He loves playing baseball. So I don't know.
Anytime you learn the main points of your game from a guy named Tony Gwynn, you're probably going to be okay. I'll leave it there. Mike, you are writing in 20 different places now. Since last we talked, of course, you had the internship at Fangraphs. I'm writing for Hardball Times now. What do you have? I know you're busy as all sin. We got the holidays coming up, though, so perhaps a breather or two. Do you have anything interesting coming out on WFNY and or Hardball Times Fangraphs?
Unfortunately, not for the moment. I have nothing. I'm in an exam.
Wait, you're going to get to take a break?
The one semi-exciting thing. I have an article being published in the Marquette Sports Law Review in the next couple weeks, which I wrote about big data in baseball. It's 35 or 40 nauseating pages of analysis and sort of medical and health law concerns for employees. So I'll probably post a link to that on Twitter, but it's not that exciting.
It's that exciting in that I'm wanting you to build building blocks to get your job in a Major League Baseball team so that I can get free tickets. That's all I care about.
We're well on the way.
All right. I'm going to close up shop there. I should have something coming out tomorrow on
Marcell Ozuna.
Yeah, my favorite Indians player, Marcell Ozuna. All I'm going to do is cut and paste my 12 articles about him previously and post them tomorrow. We didn't even get to talk about some of the crazy things that are happening in the offseason. I really think we need to dedicate a podcast to the New York Yankees over the past 18 months because I'm very interested in watching a team figure out the metrics and the money at the same time. I hate the Yankees with a passion, but what they've done over the past 18 months, starting at the trade deadline, actually before that, to build their system and then to have the potential to do what they might be doing over the next year with free agents is so scary to me. But I do want to talk about it with you, Mike, because I want to pick that metric mind of yours to find out what you really think about Brian Cashman and that Yankees organization with what they've been doing. That being said, we're going to close up shop here. Mike, I'm looking at my watch. I think our goal is always 30 minutes. I'm pretty sure we went over an hour.
Perfect. That's all we do.
All right, on that note, EHC is back. Hopefully it's not another 6 months. We got to do positional stuff.
Yeah,
See, there's another one that comes off just the wrong way. All right, I'm out. Go Tribe.
Have a good night, everybody.